selling standpoint first, and then a buyer standpoint second. Pretty simple, straightforward numbers. You sell a vehicle at a Mecum auction, you pay the entry fee, right? That's paid up front. You sell it, you pay a 10% commission fee. If it doesn't sell, there's no additional cost or fees. You're going to pay the entry fee, you just take the vehicle home. You don't sign over the title, you don't do that until it's actually sold. So you just take your vehicle home like you've taken it to a show. No harm, no foul. We continue to work that car for a couple weeks after the close of the auction, is what we call our Bid Goes On program. About 10% of all the vehicles that we sell at Mecum sell via what we call the Bid Goes On. If they don't sell on the block, they get a second chance. That's a very successful program. I don't recommend folks relying on that, saying, well, it doesn't sell on the block, I'll just sell it via Bid Goes On. Your best shot is on the block when you can, but if not, if you're just not close enough to where you need to be at, no problem, you let the Bid Goes On guys work it. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. But I want to talk about the fees, 10%. So it's a $50,000 vehicle. Well, back to that number, it's easy to calculate. You're going to take home a check for $45,000. The buyer, same thing, 10%. So he's going to pay $55,000. So Mecum is going to make $10,000 on a $50,000 vehicle plus the entry fee. Sounds like a lot of money, and it is. I don't want to downplay it. But I want to repeat, we bring in about 300 employees to run these auctions. Some come from our Mecum headquarters in Walworth, Wisconsin. About 150 full-time employees there. Some of those folks travel on the road. Some people are strictly our road warriors. A lot of the folks are husband and wife, or father, son, or mother-daughter teams that work in the office and do all of the chores that we have. It is a major logistic machine to do all these auctions. We have now 15 semis that haul all of our auction staging and our computers and our temporary offices and our bins of paperwork and everything that we need to do at an auction. We haul all that ourselves with our Mecum transport haulers. That's a full-time operation. People have compared it to a rock concert, and I don't think it's too far off of the mark when you consider lights and stage and equipment and everything else. So the expense structure is massive. I have no idea what it costs to put on one of these auctions. I'm not privy to the bottom line and the balance sheets, and I don't want to be. I don't want to know the expenses. I know what the expenses are that I turn in for all of my direct expenses, and I know what my wages are, and if you multiply that times as many people it takes to do an auction, a big part of what we earn goes right to pay. And of course, I haven't talked about the venue itself, renting the venue and the permits and the fees and the insurance and all of the stuff you don't even really think about. So that's how the fee structure works. But I've got a way to tell you, if you want to save some money, there's a pretty serious way to do it. And it's maybe another one of the key things that I want you to take away from when you leave and you're thinking about what I talked about. And that is selling your vehicle for no reserve at a reserve auction. I think that's the key. We all know Mecum Auctions is known for that protected price, that safety net of putting that protected price out there. But if you decide to sell no reserve, that 10% commission, it goes down to 6%. So you save 4 points. If you've got a collection of an expensive car, that can add up to be a lot of money. Are you taking a risk? Yeah, maybe. And here's why I say maybe. I've been with Mecum since 2006, handling literally thousands of consignments. We don't talk anybody into selling a vehicle with reserve, without reserve. We just lay out all the variables and they pick what they want to do, and we're good either way. But here's what has proven to work at a reserve auction, keyword reserve auction. The vehicles that sell no reserve, that are offered no reserve, or the collections, they stand out, they get extra attention. And those of you that have been to a Mecum auction or maybe been on our website, and if you see an entry of interest that is selling at no reserve, I know what works for me, I key in on that, I tune in on that, and I pay more attention to it. And I look at the pictures more carefully, I look at the description more carefully, I look at the vehicle on site more carefully. Because I know it is going to sell. I know it's not being consigned by somebody that has a very high expectations of just dipping their toe in the water. I know it's going to sell. And the average rank and file buyer at a Mecum auction knows the same thing. So instead of having 5 to 10 bidders on every car that we have with reserve, we might have 20 or 30 or 40 bidders on a vehicle that's being offered at no reserve. They stand out, they get extra attention. And we know from experience, the more bidders we have, the higher the vehicle's going to sell for. It's just the way the science and the math, it's the way it works out. So if you're thinking about increasing your net in your pocket, but you also want to put extra tension on the vehicle or the collection, you might want to consider going to reserve at a reserve auction such as Mecum. Some of the other big auction companies out there, they run everything no reserve. Nothing stands out apart from the rest because they're all being operated under that same banner, no reserve. These no reserve cars really stand out. And if you've noticed, paid a little bit of attention to what Mecum is doing, you'll come to the conclusion that the no reserve cars really, and the collections are really bringing big money. They're bringing astonishing money. To the point on this, that in 06, 10 years, 15, 16 years of being kind of on the front line as a Mecum spokesperson, handling a lot of consignments, recommending a lot of consignments to run at no reserve, myself personally running a handful of vehicles at Mecum auctions. Yes, I can buy and sell, just like you all can. Yes, I pay full fees. I don't get any discounts or deals, nor do I want any. Virtually everybody that has sold at Mecum no reserve has been either satisfied or even a step beyond satisfied with the results. It really does work, especially in today's strong market. And especially if you had the vehicle for a long time. Not like you bought it 1 or 2 years ago and you're worried, well, am I going to lose money on it? A car's worth what it's going to be worth. What you paid for it, what you've got invested in it, has really very little to do with what it might be worth in the market. So some food for thought in regards to at least considering going no reserve should you decide to sell. It has proven to be very worthwhile, and in a strong market, it should get extra attention and extra priority. A couple more things I want to talk about before I open up for some questions is in regard to how do we vet out our cars? Do we accept all entries? We talked about we talk about the value with the potential seller. We discuss it with him. We try to get on the same page. We get the car entered. Now the next step is we get pictures, we get descriptions of the cars. And what happens when we get a description that says certain things like original paint, original owner, numbers matching, original engine, original drivetrain, all of those statements. Well, I can tell you that internally, when we see any of those statements, red flags pop up all over the place. To the point where if we have somebody that makes a statement like that, we ask for supporting documentation and a separate, apart from the regular consignment documentation, a statement from the consignor that his statements are accurate. And I'll tell you what typically happens. You get a guy with a car and you say, okay, you say it's original paint, original engine. How do you know that? How long have you had it? Well, I've only had it for 2 years, but that's what the guy I bought it from told me. No. It may be original paint, original engine, or it may not be, but unless that individual can prove it to us with documentation, we're not going to promote it as such. We can't get in the middle of being involved in making statements that down the road or during the auction or even before the auction can be disproved. I would say probably about half the time, the descriptions that we get have to be rewritten to make a more accurate representation. People that have not done business with us before might just presume that we're going to print anything that they say about the description of it, and they want to make it sound as good as they can. Sales buffering. We've all probably been guilty of that at different times when we try to sell things. But unfortunately, as a high-profile major company, we just simply cannot get involved with that. Are we 100% accurate? No. But I bet we're probably in the 99% range, to the point where we've actually got an entire department within Mecum. There's 3 full-time guys currently that spend all their time looking at these descriptions and then getting hold of those consignors, making sure that these descriptions are accurate and these statements can be backed up. And if not, we have to back those out of the description. And occasionally we'll lose a consignment. Somebody will say, well, if I can't say that, I'm not going to enter it. We try to talk to them and reason with them, but sometimes people say, no, I'm not going to do it. Then they have to go off to some other source that doesn't maybe vet out the vehicles as carefully as we do. So it's the old adage, let the buyer beware. Now in the Pontiac world, we've got one major asset on our side in a lot of ways in regard to authenticity of vehicles that our friends over on the Chevy side simply do not have. And of course, once again, that's Jim Madison with PHS being able to provide build information to verify what you're looking at is exactly what you're going to end up with. Guys in the Chevy world, we don't have that. 70 SS 396 or 454 LS6, 375 first 396 or whatever. There's no information on the car, on the data plate, on the trim tag, or available from Chevrolet to verify it's authentic. Same thing with mid-60s Corvettes, 67 big block Corvette, 435, red, white interior, all the right stuff. Yeah, trim tag's going to show the color. They can be changed. Trim tags are available in production, unfortunately. Usually we can tell those apart. But again, no paperwork from the manufacturer. Now, 67 Vet does have a build sheet, the tank sticker as it's known as, but one little problem with the tank sticker on the 67 Corvette, there's no VIN number on it. So, point is, in our Pontiac world, GTO specifically, we reduce a lot of the problems of incorrect descriptions with, thanks to the folks at PHS. And as some of you may be aware, that's been written about recently, the microfiche records are starting to deteriorate, unfortunately, with no apparent way to stop that and slow that down. So if you do not have the paperwork on your specific car, or you haven't run it in a long time, highly, and I'm going to be doing this with my 64 GTO as well. My PHS stocks go all the way back to the early 2000s. I want to get a fresh set. I think they're adding a few little extra historical tidbits that they've learned about over the years. But you definitely want to get that done before those are vanished. Jim, what kind of a time period are we looking at? Are you recommending to folks as far as the microfiche still being legible?
Well, I mean, the microfilm, as you is continuing to deteriorate. I mean, it's a celluloid film, just like motion picture film, and the term is called redox, and it just washes out over time. But there's no set, it's not a particular reel or anything out, or a particular year. I could have 3 images, one on either side would be perfect, and the one in the middle is almost illegible. Many of them that we've had to do recently, we can actually get we can read it on our viewer, but we can't print a legible copy. So what we're doing is we will print out whatever we can, as bad as it may be, but we'll go ahead and send it off to the owner, letter form under my signature. And we're doing it that way. But we've had Kodak come in and look at, doing things and try to put it on a computer. And we looked at 1964. In 1964 alone, they wanted to pay $400,000 with no guarantee for accuracy. If I had that kind of money, we wouldn't be sitting here right now.
And just a reminder, Jim is going to be speaking today here in this room at 1 o'clock, and our friend Tim Dye is going to be here at 7 o'clock tonight. So, nice place to kind of beat the heat, take a little break, and listen to the experts in the field. One more thing I want to talk about, authenticity that you get at Mecum that I'm not sure anybody else does. This is a critical one, and this pertains to everybody that's ever bought or sold a car, a collector car, or otherwise. And that is we request and we have to have a copy of the title, both front and back part of the title, and we also need a copy of the VIN tag. And of course, we all have cell phones now where you can just do a cell phone picture, send it in. And there's a couple things that we're looking for. Number one, the title, we're looking for a title that we would consider to be what's referred to as a legal and negotiable title, meaning that the title is a legal title and that it has room on it or the ability for that to be transferred to the next owner. And there's a lot of reasons why that might not be the case. We don't have to go into now, but just know that you've got to have a good title. The title, this is really critical. The title has to be in your name. You cannot have bought a car from your next door neighbor 10 years ago. He signed it and you left it open. That's called jumping the title. That's a felony, by the way. Title has to be in your name. That title will have to appear to be unaltered, and that VIN number, this is the most important of all, that VIN number on that title has to match the VIN on the vehicle. Now I would just ask yourselves here, when's the last time anyone in this room has ever bought or sold a vehicle, new, used, or indifferent, and has ever checked the VIN number on the title against the VIN on the car. It's usually a very low percentage. We have to check that. And I will tell you that about 10% of the time, it does not match. Does not match. Usually it's only off by one number or a letter. It's an error. Usually in most cases it's an error, and guess what? Our staff, our team, we know how to jump through the hoops and to help a consignor get that title corrected. That's another reason why the 4-month rule comes into play. You want to make sure that you're getting everything in so we can get everything straightforward for a seamless sale. But there are times where a VIN tag has been changed, and also altering, moving a VIN tag. People say it all the time, well, I took it off for the restoration because I wanted to make it look really good underneath the VIN tag, and they put it back on with either pop rivets or with a rivet that kind of maybe sort of looks like would have been an original rivet. Well, guess what? Red flags. Now there's ways around it, there's ways around that. The step one in those cases where we have one of those funny VIN tags is we advise a consignor to look at and supply us with what's referred to as the confidential VINs. Different cars have got locations of the VIN number in alternate, hidden, typically hidden, not always hidden, but other places on the vehicle. So that's step one. Step two, if that appears to be a problem, this would be maybe true with cars that have been built out of a couple different cars, as you know, there's anything wrong with it. You know, getting an old car rejuvenated after it's been wrecked or after it's been dormant for a long time is not necessarily a bad thing. But there's ways to get around these VIN issues as long as something's not showing up as being stolen, theft, and sometimes that can go back 30, 40 years by getting what's referred to as a state-assigned VIN. Every state has a procedure and a policy, and every state does it differently. But once again, on our staff, we've actually got 2 part-time, retired state police guys that specialize in the auto theft department, and they've heard it, and they've seen it all. And they're at all of our auctions, and they're available for us to be able to refer to them before an auction if we're having a problem. And they can usually find somebody as a direct contact directly to go out, inspect the car, and put a state-assigned VIN on that vehicle. That's a different process, a different procedure than you might expect. But if you're going to sell, bottom line is you're going to sell at a Mecum auction or you're going to buy, you can be about as assured as you can that you're getting a car with a legal VIN and a legal title. And that's not always the case, folks, out there dealing with selling vehicles online or at some of the other auction companies. They're not as picky as we are. As the biggest and being very high profile, we've had to get really firm on this. And we've had to beef with our staff to be able to jump through these hoops. Back in the old days, back in the pre-cell phone days, we would have to wait until the vehicles would show up at the auction for check-in. And we would inspect the cars, the VINs and the titles, and then the cars that didn't pass would go off in a corner, and we'd work like crazy to get those in. And a bunch of cars we could never have cross the auction block because they weren't legal for us to sell. That makes us unhappy when less car to sell. A car we promoted, a buyer comes in, and we had one guy, I'll give you an example, a guy and a gal came in from Sweden to buy one car. It didn't show up at an auction, it wasn't because of the VIN. The seller decided not to bring the car. They came from Sweden to bid on it and look at it and buy it, and the car was a no-show. They wanted us to pay all their travel expenses. They were that unhappy. So, the only reason I'm telling you that is there's a lot more behind the scenes and our concern for making sure that these cars that we're selling are described as accurately as possible and are legal for us to sell from a VIN standpoint and from a title standpoint. And it should give you peace of mind as a buyer that we jump through those hoops. And I would also ask to have a little bit of patience with us if you decide to sell a car and you have some of these issues. Just be a little bit patient with us and understand why we have to play hardball on this topic. So, anyway, with that, I would be glad to open